In this video, we'll talk about errors in the suspense account. It builds on from the previous videos where we balanced the ledgers and prepared the trial balance. In this video, we'll talk about errors, the nature of errors, how to correct the errors, and how you use the suspense account. I also forgot to include that we'll talk about how errors impact our profit. So there are two types of errors that you come across in the accounting system. There are errors that cannot be detected by the trial balance, and these include the error of omission, error of commission, error of principal, error of original entry, reversal of entries, duplication of entries, and compensating errors. There are also errors that can be detected by the trial balance, such as posting only one part of a double entry, posting a different value of debits and credits, arithmetic errors, opening balances that haven't been brought down properly, and extraction errors. Let's talk about errors that cannot be detected by the trial balance. The first one is the error of omission. So this is a transaction that has been completely omitted from the accounting records. For example, a cash sale of $100 that hasn't been recorded. No debit, no credit. The trial balance will balance, and yet the error is there. There's also the error of commission, where a transaction has been recorded in the wrong account. So for instance, rates expense of $500 have been debited to the rent account. This is an error, and yet the trial balance will balance. There's also the error of principal, where a transaction is conceptually recorded incorrectly. For instance, you have a debit expense, or you have a debit to the expense account for a purchase of a non-current asset, and yet we know that a purchase of a non-current asset is supposed to be debited to the asset account and not the expense account. So this is an error. The trial balance will balance, and yet there's an error. There's also a compensating error, where two separate errors are made and they cancel each other out. For instance, rent of $1,200 has been debited to the rent account as $1,400. At the same time, there's a casting error on the sales account that has resulted in sales being overstated by $200. So these errors are cancelling themselves out, and the trial balance will balance, yet the accounting system has errors. There's an error of original entry, where the correct double entry has been made but with the wrong amount. So for instance, a cash sale of 76 has been recorded both as a debit and a credit at 67. So this is an error, and yet the trial balance will balance. The final error we'll talk about that cannot be detected by the trial balance is a reversal of entries, where the correct amount has been posted to the correct accounts but on the wrong side. So for instance, a cash sale of 200 has been debited to sales and credited to bank, and yet it's supposed to be the opposite. So this error is going to be there, yet the trial balance will balance. Let's now talk about how you correct errors. So we'll start with errors that cannot be detected by the trial balance. Regardless of the type of error, you need to find those errors and correct them, and you can do it using the following steps. You need to check the trial balance to calculate if there's a difference between the total debits and total credits in the trial balance. You will then check if the total debits exceed the total credits, post the difference to the credit side of the suspense account. In that case, if the total credits exceeds the total debits, you post the difference to the debit side of the suspense account. We'll see how this is done in a little bit. Then, in terms of error correction, you need to identify the errors which account for the suspense account difference and record the correcting entries in the journal. The approach to error correction, regardless of the error type, is as follows. Ask yourself what should have been done. Then ask what was the double entry that was actually done, and therefore what correction is required. For example, purposes, assume that if one side of the double entry is not mentioned, then that side has been recorded correctly. The side that has been mentioned is likely the one that has got an error. Let's practice this using some questions. So I've got this list of questions which are a bit more clear on the following slide. So the first transaction we have is that a cash sale of 100 was not recorded. I would recommend that at this point you pause the video, you read the questions, solve them, and then come back so that we solve them together. So you can pause now. Alright, so with the first entry, what should happen is that we're supposed to debit cash and credit sales. What was done was nothing. Therefore, to correct that, we need to debit cash with 100 and credit sales with 100. The second transaction is that rates expense of 500 paid in cash has been debited to the rent account in error. So with that one, what we should do is that we're supposed to debit rates with 500 and credit cash with 500. What was done is that we debited rent 500 and credited cash 500. Therefore, to correct the entries, we need to debit the rates with 500 so that we record the rates correctly, and then we credit rent 500 in order to reverse the incorrect debit entry to the rent account. The next one is that a non-current asset purchase of 1,000 on credit has been debited to the repairs expense account rather than an asset account. So in that case, what should happen is that we're supposed to debit the non-current asset account with $100, with $1,000, and credit our payables with $1,000. But what was done is that we debited repairs with $1,000 and credited our payables with $1,000. To correct that, we're supposed to debit our non-current asset with $1,000 to record the asset correctly, and then we credit repairs with $1,000 in order to reverse the incorrect debit to the repairs account. The fourth one is that a rent bill of 1,200 paid in cash has been debited to the rent account as 1,400, and the casting error on the sales account has resulted in sales being overstated by 200. So those errors were probably even compensating themselves. So what we should do is that we should debit our rent with 1,200 and credit our cash with 1,200. But what was done is that we debited rent 1,400 and credited cash 1,200. To correct this entry, we're supposed to credit rent with 200 to reverse the extra. That's supposed to be $200, not pounds. So we're supposed to credit rent with 200 to reverse the extra amount, and then we debit sales with 200 to correct the casting error. The next one is that a cash sale of 76 has been recorded as 67. So in that case, we're supposed to debit cash 76 and credit sales 76. However, we debited cash 67 and credited sales 67, so we need to top up the extra by debiting cash with 9 and crediting sales with 9 in order to record the amount that we recorded. The last transaction is that a cash sale of 200 has been debited to sales and credited to cash. In this case, what we should do is that we should debit cash with 200 and credit sales with 200, but what we actually did is that we debited sales with 200 and credited cash with 200. To correct the entry, we should debit cash with 400 and credit sales with 400 to firstly reverse the error of 200 and then to record the correct amount of 200 on both accounts. Okay, so what we've covered in the example above are errors that cannot be detected by the trial balance. Let's look a bit on errors that can be detected by the trial balance. To begin with, we'll try and balance a trial balance. So we've got this trial balance and we've been asked to total the trial balance and prepare a suspense account. This is what you would normally do when preparing the suspense account at trial balance stage. If you haven't seen how to prepare a trial balance, I would recommend you watch the previous videos where we prepared the trial balance. But what you will see from this trial balance is that the debit side is 6,750, the credit side is 6,700. Therefore, we put the higher amount on both sides, but the credit side is not balancing. To balance it up, we need to put the difference, but this is not going to be a balance carried down because this is a suspense account. It's simply a list of balances, and so we call that a suspense account balance. The question also asked us to prepare a suspense account. So as at now, we've prepared the trial balance and we have the suspense amount. But to prepare a suspense account, we simply get that suspense amount on the side that it's showing and show it in the statement. So here we are in the suspense account, and this is the way it's going to look. Let's now look at an example for correcting errors detected by the trial balance. So what we have here is an example that says a new accountant at Trade Queens found that the debits were more than the credits by $957 while preparing a trial balance. So Trade Queens must be an organization, a company, a sole proprietor, or even a partnership. So he further discovered a suspense account with a debit balance of $1,075. Since he did not know the causes of the differences, he posted the $957 to the suspense account and then investigated the situation. Further investigation later revealed that 1. A debit balance of 75 on the postage account had been incorrectly extracted on the list of balances at 750. So it goes on and on about the things that he has discovered. And the example goes on and on. So what the question is asking us is what journal entries are required to correct the errors and eliminate the suspense account. So to correct these errors, we are going to go transaction by transaction. So the first transaction says a debit balance of 75 on the postage account had been incorrectly extracted on the list of balances as 750 debit. To correct this one, the double entry is supposed to be debit the suspense with 675 and credit the postages with 675.